HAV.com. For the fan, it's the ultimate address for sports.
There's a place where the stars shine night and day, and the greatest movies of all time play uninterrupted and commercial-free from that big film reel in the sky. Some folks call it a channel. But Turner Classic Movies is, well, it's movie heaven. For your own piece of movie heaven, call your cable company and ask for Turner Classic Movies. Truly movie heaven.
Money Trail, Tuesday, 7 Eastern on CNN.
No matter who we are, where we live, life today can be tough. We all struggle. But there is a way to have peace and confidence in facing whatever comes along. There is reason for hope. We're your neighbors, the people of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, and we'd like you to know that with Christ, there's plenty of hope to go around.
I bought this car for me. But if anyone takes notice, that's okay too. Aurora, defy convention.
Fidel Castro's Cuban Revolution has lasted over 40 years. What direction will it take into the next century? Continued U.S. pressure and a struggling economy threaten Cuba. What does the future hold for President Castro and his people? CNN, the only U.S. television agency based in Cuba, with Havana Bureau Chief Lucia Newman, correspondents John Zarella and Larry Woods, brings you a compelling half-hour look at Cuba, the struggling revolution. Wednesday, 6:30 Eastern on CNN.
Sunday night, NFL on TNT. When the...
It's a head trip.
Well, a new book says that President Lyndon...
The very thought of you.
Headline News. Anytime for a fast-paced 30-minute update. A whole day's news in a half hour. That's the Headline News guarantee.
This is the CNN Headline News Network.
Are you paying too much for term life insurance? Now, premiums for $250,000 coverage are as low as $18 a month. Through Matrix Direct Insurance Services, you could save up to 75%, maybe even more, on term life insurance from one of the country's top insurers, Transamerica. Now, by calling Matrix Direct, a 35-year-old man could get $250,000 term life coverage for less than $18 a month. And that low premium is guaranteed for 10 years. Also, by calling Matrix Direct, a 42-year-old man could get $100,000 term life coverage for less than $14 a month. Call Matrix Direct. Talk with a licensed insurance professional for a fast, free quote right over the phone. You'll see why thousands have called Matrix Direct to save on quality term life insurance for men and women. Call 1-800-543-3088. Matrix Direct, 1-800-543-3088.
Art fans can get their fix of the Masters and then some online at the web address called The Find Site. The website touts itself as a virtual museum in cyberspace. Click on the greatest painters to sample the works from Cezanne to Warhol, or take in the greatest animations on the web. Here, artists use the latest web techniques to launch a sensory assault on the eyes and the ears. The site has more than pretty pictures. Visitors will find detailed information about the artist and featured pieces of works. There are links to interactive exhibits too. Under Eye Candy, you can warp Leonardo da Vinci's masterpiece, the Mona Lisa, or take in a fireworks display complete with loud bangs. Finally, don't forget to visit CyberGuide for hundreds of reviews on websites worth seeing. Check out cnn.com/online for a link to this site and others. And that's what's online.
Some famous names will be joining the National Women's Hall of Fame this summer. The sponsoring organization says it'll induct 21 women at a ceremony in Seneca Falls, New York this July. Among those being honored, Secretary of State Madeleine Albright, the first woman to hold the country's top diplomatic post. Other inductees include award-winning poet and writer Maya Angelou, astronaut Shannon Lucid, and opera singer Beverly Sills. A pioneering nuclear scientist and the founder of Bradley University in Peoria, Illinois, will also be inducted. The calendar says winter, but the fashion industry is already thinking ahead to warmer climes. Elsa Clinch looks at the spring-summer collection from a Tokyo designer.
The spring-summer Tokyo designer Issey Miyake celebrates women, their grace, beauty, poise, and personalities. He tells me he searched for just the right models. He wanted women with international lifestyles who can convey his message of modernity.
I try to find really women, girls, really I admired. But you see is a really wonderful girls, and we spoke and we communicate each other, and really we are working. They understand what I want to show.
Miyake divides his collection into 6 sections. Blush is shrouds of gossamer chiffon that wrap the body in pastel shades. Miyake calls his second group Dusk, cotton and bias-cut linen nettings that cling to the body in earthy tones, while mist drapes to reveal and conceal a woman's body at the same time.
A lot of new fabrics, and there are a lot of stretch, is transparent, and also cotton, silk, but very, very feather-light fabrics. But I don't show nudities.
Miyake named his 4th group Bubbles, pigment-dyed dots and squares in bias-cut knits that squeeze in or puff out. Impressions is lightweight linen or fine summer cotton skirts and dresses. The final group Miyake calls Just Before, perhaps a hint of what's to come next season.
I want to show the softness and movement body, and also beautiful shape of women's, not tight, not sexy look, but something sensitive and sensual.
That's Issey Miyake with his spring-summer collection. Elsa Clinch, CNN, Tokyo.
Coming up in 2 minutes, we'll show you how Americans are celebrating this King holiday, and we'll tell you about the latest auto accessory, your airbag on-off switch. I'm Chuck Roberts. Don't turn us off. This is CNN Headline News.
This is the CNN Headline News Network.
Tuesday night, watch when Western Conference power Seattle travels to Texas for a showdown with the Mavs. Sonics, Mavs, tomorrow night at 8, prime time, nationwide. The NBA's on TNT.
Tonight on Larry King Live, he was a star in music, TV, and politics until a tragic skiing accident claimed his life. We'll talk about Sonny Bono's legacy with his wife, Mary Bono, tonight, 9 Eastern on CNN.
This is CNN Headline News.
Everyone's talking about improving health care. Who's got the power to do that? You do. Choose one good food, break one bad habit, or just put one foot in front of the other. Use your power to make one big difference in your health. You've got the power to improve your health. You've got the power of one.
Brought to you by Imago's Day Spa.
your worries on the doorstep. Oh, life can be so sweet on the sunny side of the street.
La Quinta Inn & Suites, an oasis from the world. Call about our winter special.
It's a day to remember a hero of nonviolence, but a holiday parade is interrupted by the fatal sound of gunfire. Rescuers continue to search for anyone who might be trapped under this collapsed building. A dozen people have been rescued so far. And today's the day you can get an off switch on your car's airbags after you fill out a lot of paperwork. I'm Chuck Roberts with CNN Headline News. Good afternoon. Welcome back. A parade to honor the memory of civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. ended fatally today in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, as police say a gunman fired in a crowd of parade marchers after a personal feud. A 25-year-old man is dead, 3 children wounded, hospitalized. Their conditions described as either guarded or critical. Police have ruled out any racial motivation for the incident because the shooter and the victims are all African American.
Obviously, when this occurred, there was mass pandemonium and confusion, and it took quite some time with the crowd fleeing in different directions to be able to begin to develop some consistent information from the witnesses. But everything at this point does make it appear that the shots were fired from within the group that was marching itself, and that it appears to be a personal dispute or argument between two parties that had no racial or political overtones whatsoever.
Police say they've tentatively identified the suspected gunman and that they're confident an arrest will be made. In Dr. King's hometown, Atlanta, the day was marked with commemoration and a special announcement. Vice President Al Gore joined Coretta Scott King to lay a wreath at the slain civil rights leader's tomb. Earlier, the Vice President spoke at Ebenezer Baptist, the church where King grew up and co-pastored. Gore used the occasion to announce a new civil rights initiative.
That is why I'm pleased to announce here today that President Clinton and I are proposing, as part of his initiative on race, the largest single increase in the enforcement of our civil rights laws in nearly 2 decades. Through new reforms, and through heightened commitment to enforcement, we will seek to prevent discrimination before it occurs and punish those who do discriminate in employment, education, housing, health care, and in access for those with disabilities.
President Clinton spent a good part of the day doing something that's come to be associated with the King holiday, public service work. With paint roller in hand, he joined school volunteers and members of the AmeriCorps service program to spruce up a high school in Washington. Last week, he urged Americans to remember King with a day of service. The Guatemalan ambassador to the United States says he'll visit St. Mary's College in Maryland on Tuesday. He says he'd like to express regrets for the Friday attack on students from the school who were touring Guatemala. Here's an update now from Carl Rochelle.
Shock and disbelief rocked the normally quiet campus of this small southern Maryland college as word spread of the rape and robbery of a student study group in Guatemala. 13 students ranging in age from 18 to 22 and 3 faculty members were robbed at gunpoint last Friday. 5 female students were assaulted. Some of the victims have already returned to campus.
I was the first person that they pulled off the bus. They searched me, they took my money. I had very little money left. They were puzzled as to that. They said, "Where's the rest of your money?" I indicated I had no more.
The student study group was on its way back to Guatemala City when the incident happened. They were finishing up a 17-day field trip studying Mayan ruins. Their bus driver says 2 trucks with 7 men firing guns forced him to stop, boarded the bus, and pointed guns at the heads of the passengers.
Quite frankly, their first attempt was to rob. And that was their primary motive. They were a little frustrated that they did not gain the amount of American doleros that they wished, and they were roughing them up.
Students on their first day back from the holiday break expressed dismay at the incident.
I was absolutely horrified. I mean, I know people go abroad all the time, and you know there's going to be some kind of risks involved when you leave the country, but I don't think anyone ever really thinks about something like that happening.
Shock. Just basically really shocked about the whole thing, that such a thing could happen, you know, to us in particular.
The Guatemalan ambassador says dealing with the attack is his government's highest priority.
This is a totally isolated event
And we really, really regret it and deplore that type of actions.
And President Clinton, at a Martin Luther King Day event, expressed his concern.
The main thing we need to do now is be concerned with the victims and their families and do whatever we can to minimize such things happening.
King's birthday with a day of service. He also wants to boost federal funding for civil rights.
Visit to the communist island nation. CNN's Christiane Amanpour is in Havana, and she begins our coverage of this historic and holy trip. Christiane?
Good evening from Havana, and a rare haze here. Indeed, these are rare times indeed. In the past couple of days, Cuban officials from Fidel Castro on down have been urging everyone to get out and greet the Pope when he arrives. State-run media and newspapers like this one have decided to trumpet the visit, provide a proper reception, and perhaps bask in the reflected glory of the papal presence. Preparations are underway in earnest. The Cuban National Orchestra and the choir staged a dress rehearsal for the Pope's main mass in Havana later this week. Also taking part, many of the nuns who have kept the Catholic Church going in its darkest days here, and priests practiced their procession on the special altar. At the Mass, people will face this, a giant portrait of Jesus Christ staring down on Revolution Square for the first time in 40 years. Che Guevara, the Square's perennial patron saint, will, for one day at least, see a lot of backs. As CNN's Lucia Newman reports, all this open Catholicism is new for this generation of Cubans.
Like the proverbial camel going through the eye of a needle, the largest Pope-mobile ever just barely squeezed through the gates of the Vatican Embassy in Havana, where Pope John Paul II will be staying. To ensure the Pope has a gentle ride, construction crews are rushing to fill all the potholes along his route, which the government has lined with posters welcoming the pontiff to Cuba.
In years past, Pope John Paul II would kiss the ground as he arrived in a new country. But now, because of his frail health, when he arrives here at José Martí International Airport, 2 children will lift a basket of earth up to his lips so that he can kiss Cuban soil.
Both the state and the Catholic Church are busy promoting the first ever visit by a pope to this communist country, which until not so long ago officially called itself atheist. Believers and non-believers alike are waiting in anticipation.
We've been waiting for years for him to come. We've never seen a pope.
For
us believers, I think the visit is very important. I think it will reaffirm our faith.
Judging by the invasion of some 3,000 journalists and technicians, it's obvious the international news media is also fascinated by the visit of the anti-communist Pope to Cuba. The Catholic Church hierarchy, however, is being careful to prepare the people not to expect political or economic changes, warning the Pope does not make miracles. Still listening to the 450-person pastoral choir rehearse for next Sunday's papal mass, it seems that just a visit of Pope John Paul II is miracle enough. Lucia Newman, CNN, Havana.
And CNN plans extensive live coverage of the papal visit throughout this week. Indeed, when we come back in 20 minutes from now, we'll hear about the pontiff's visit from anti-Castro Cubans living in the United States, and we'll speak to President Roberto Alarcón, president of the Cuban National Assembly.
All right, Christiane in Havana. Thank you. Bernie.
And just ahead on Worldview, Israel gains a strategic edge in the Middle East with the arrival of some ultra-sophisticated warplanes. Also, it's school days again for some Christiane Amanpour will be following events throughout this week. She joins us again from Havana. Christiane?
Bernie, we've been discussing how Cubans here are preparing for the Pope's visit, but in Miami, it's Cuba sí, as always, Castro no, because Miami is the fiefdom of the anti-Castro Cuban exiles, and their pressure has forced the Catholic hierarchy in Miami to cancel a special pilgrimage that was planned here. As CNN's John Zarella reports, the Miami exiles have decidedly mixed feelings about the Pope's trip to Cuba.
On a wall in Raul Hernandez's office hangs a picture of Buzz Aldrin on the moon. It reads, "We came in peace for all mankind." Hernandez feels the same way about Pope John Paul's upcoming pilgrimage to Cuba.
I think this is completely unprecedented, and I feel that I should not be anyplace else but in Cuba at that time, and I'm going.
But Hernandez, who came to the United States during the Mariel boat lift, knows that in Miami,
nothing is easy with Cuba.
The Catholic Archdiocese of Miami, under pressure from high-powered Cuban Americans, canceled plans to take a cruise ship with 1,000 pilgrims to Havana for the Pope's Mass. The plan was simply too divisive.
This was a ship that was going to be sailing over the very same waters where thousands of Cubans have died trying to leave the island.
I am sorry that they didn't know the religious importance of having 3 cardinals and I don't know how many archbishops on a ship that was going to bless the same waters where so many people have died.
We're going to Cuba. We're just not going on this cruise ship.
Cubans here say they support the Pope's trip, but many refuse to set foot in Cuba or spend money there while Fidel Castro is running the show, a feeling not shared by all Cuban Americans.
The Lord be with you.
Cuban-born Father Ramon Hernandez, leading a group of Tampa pilgrims to Havana, says it's time to look to the future.
All the time are speaking about the past, what happened yesterday. And I think it's time for say, well, I'm suffering that happened yesterday, but today is today and tomorrow will be tomorrow. We need to go ahead.
But that message is not welcome to many Cubans in Miami, as long as Fidel Castro still runs things in Cuba. John Zarella, CNN, Miami.
And joining us right now in Havana is Ricardo Alarcón, president of Cuba's National Assembly. Mr. Alarcón, how do you react to a Spanish cardinal accompanying the Pope, who today was quoted as saying the Pope's visit here could be the beginning of the end for Fidel Castro and his system?
I think that's a big exaggeration in any case. That's nothing of that kind will happen. And I am sorry that this gentleman has said such a thing. I don't think that that's in the Pope's minds or in the Church minds at all.
What do you hope to hear from the Pope when he's here? What do you hope his public message will be?
Well, he will say whatever he thinks he should. I am convinced that he will carry a universal message, as always he does. A message of spirituality, of family values, for his view of how human beings should behave on earth, and also some message on behalf of his church, trying to promote it. That's quite normal.
In the lead up to the Pope's visit, clearly Cuban officials have been carefully trying to figure out how to greet the pontiff. But in the last couple of days, Fidel Castro himself and now all the state-run organizations are calling on the Cubans to come out in mass, in force, to greet the Pope. Why is that?
Because we believe that he should be received warmly by, not only by Catholics, and not only by other Christians, but also by those many Cubans who follow Afro-Cuban religions, and for all those Cubans that do not follow any religion at all. It's a very important visit. He's a very respected personality, and he deserves to be received by every Cuban. That's why we're trying to persuade people as much as possible to attend the masses and every activity of the Pope, and helping the church to organize them.
Given the history of the Cuban Revolution and the Catholic Church, the restrictions it put on the Catholic Church, were you worried that perhaps a spontaneous, huge turnout for the Pope might be interpreted as a protest against the system here?
Quite the contrary. If that were the case, we would not be precisely calling the people to massively attend. The fact is that there were some problems long ago, at the beginning of the 60s, but the Catholic Church has always existed. They have had their seminars, they have had their school, Sunday school activities, they have been able to designate their bishops independently from the state, and they represent a sector of our population that many of them has always been in favor of the revolution. I mean, grassroots Catholics.
How much will they see on live television? I understand there's still a debate as to how much of the arrival and the mass is to show live.
I am sure that our TV will give very large coverage to the Pope's activities. Some things will be live because they coincide with the working hours of our TV. For sure, the Mass on Sunday in Havana. And in Camaguey, their local station will carry the Mass there, in Santa Clara, in Santiago. And for sure, the arrival of the Pope and his departure will be covered, and the other activities. He will be having meetings with several groups.
Everybody's watching this. Everybody thinks that it may or may not have some kind of political repercussions. It's being held in the context also of the U.S. embargo against Cuba. All of that, people clearly want to see a change in Cuba. And we hear always from officials such as yourself that everything is fine here, that the Catholic Church is fine, that the people are fine, and everything's hunky-dory. If that is the case, why is it then, you've just had recent elections, that you still, after 40 years of revolution, are not able to allow the people to freely choose their candidates?
It's the opposite. They freely choose the candidates. Here is the people themselves who nominate candidates from the grassroots all the way up. It's a different system. It's not the system that prevails in the U.S., but the U.S. system is not the only thing in the world. Cuba is a different society. Every nation has a different soul, a different tradition, a different history, as every individual. I think that we should aspire to better our relationships with our closer neighbors. I remember watching you recently in Tehran when the president of Iran referred to his desire to develop people-to-people relationship. The reaction, as I understood from Washington, was that they preferred to have official talks between the two governments. Well, we are in favor of people-to-people talks. We are in favor of government-to-government bilateral discussions between Cuba and the U.S., respecting our differences, recognizing the fact that we are two separate countries. And more than that, we have offered President Clinton to come down here and to explain why he considers his system better than ours.
Briefly, you know very well, though, that Washington and other countries want to see democracy, proper democracy here. Do you think that in the foreseeable future there will be, for instance, the chance for Cubans to elect opposition candidates from more than just one officially sanctioned party?
The party is not the one who chooses the candidates, it's the people.
But it's one party, sir. I'm asking you just, do you think that there will be in the foreseeable future, you say you want better relations with the United States, the chance to choose from a variety of candidates and a variety of parties?
We want better relations, but on a simple basis, mutual respect. I like apple pie, but not everything in the U.S. And I do not pretend that the U.S. has to change to accommodate with my views in order to have normal relations.
So that's a no?
That's a no.
Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Alarcon. And we will have extensive live coverage of events in Cuba, the Pope's trip, and all the other surrounding events as this week goes on. I'm Cristiana Wanpour, live in Havana.
Thank you, Christian, and Judy and I will be right back with more of Worldview.
generosity is only the latest of Mr. Castro's efforts to make the Pope's visit a success in Cuba. CNN's Lucia Newman reports on what's at stake for El Presidente and his country.
Ask President Fidel Castro what he stands to gain from the Pope's visit, and he insists nothing.
We do not expect anything. We pursue no material interest. Simply the Pope honors us with his visit.
The president is being diplomatic. As almost any high-level official will tell you, the bet is the papal visit will give Cuba a badly needed boost of international prestige, just as Washington is increasing pressure for Cuba to be treated as a pariah nation. At the very least, the Pope is expected to condemn the U.S. economic embargo against Cuba, and according to high-level church sources, could even call for direct dialogue between Washington and Havana. All this music to the ears of President Castro. But will the anti-communist Pope also put pressure on the socialist Castro to reform his politics? Castro told us he doesn't think so.
No tengo el menor indicio de que el Papa...
I don't have the slightest indication that the Pope harbors the intention of convincing me to stop being a patriot, to stop being a revolutionary, to stop defending our nation and our cause. It would be truly strange for anyone to imagine me trying to convince the Pope to renounce his convictions and his ideas.
The risk for President Castro is that a newly empowered Catholic Church could become the focal point for those wanting to end his rule. History shows that in countries where organized opposition is outlawed, the Catholic Church often becomes a powerful voice of dissent, which is difficult, if not impossible, to muzzle. Lucia Newman, CNN, Havana.
And stay right here for more on the Pope's visit to Cuba. We'll have live reports from the communist country all this week. And join us Thursday, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 Pacific, for a CNN special on the Pope's first ever trip to Cuba. The pontiff will arrive tomorrow in Havana. President
First ever visit the communist island nation. CNN's Christiane Amanpour is following every step of this historic 5-day journey, and she joins us now from Havana. Christiane?
Judy, we're here in the Plaza of the Revolution, and the closer the Pope's trip comes, the more surreal this whole thing seems. Here we are in this monument to Cuban communism with the monument behind us, the great lit mural of Che Guevara in front of us, and to the right of us, for the first time in 4 decades, a giant mural has been going up and is now completed of Jesus Christ. Altar, the dove-shaped altar, the dove of peace, is going up. The final touches are going on that for the Pope's main mass, which will be in this Plaza of the Revolution on Sunday. Fidel Castro and other Cuban officials are doing their best to exhort all the Cuban people to come out. The Cuban workers are being told that they will get a day off with pay to come and greet the Pope, to attend any masses they want. And this after decades of official atheism and secularism here in Cuba, where Catholicism was really kept behind closed doors and when Communist Party officials were forbidden from being believers. Now, both the Pope and Fidel Castro stand to gain a lot from this historic encounter, and CNN's Lucia Newman reports the perspective from Havana.
Ask President Fidel Castro what he stands to gain from the Pope's visit, and he insists nothing.
We do not expect anything. We pursue no material interest. Simply the Pope honors us with his visit.
The president is being diplomatic. As almost any high-level official will tell you, the bet is the papal visit will give Cuba a badly needed boost of international prestige, just as Washington is increasing pressure for Cuba to be treated as a pariah nation.
I think it's a demonstration of the reality of a nation that exists, that deserves to be visited and to be respected as the Vatican does.
At At the very least, the Pope is expected to condemn the U.S. economic embargo against Cuba, and according to high-level church sources, could even call for direct dialogue between Washington and Havana. All this music to the ears of President Castro. But will the anti-communist Pope also put pressure on the socialist Castro to reform his politics? Castro told us he doesn't think so.
No tengo el menor indicio de que el Papa.
I don't have the slightest indication that the Pope harbors the intention of convincing me to stop being a patriot, to stop being a revolutionary, to stop defending our nation and our cause. It would be truly strange for anyone to imagine me trying to convince the Pope to renounce his convictions and his ideas.
Indeed, Castro says the Pope has even prayed for him, for which he is grateful. But all this papal support doesn't come cheap. In exchange, the Vatican expects the stifled Cuban Catholic Church to be allowed a bigger, more influential role in society. The risk for President Castro is that a newly empowered Catholic Church could become the focal point for those wanting to end his rule. History shows that in countries where organized opposition is outlawed, the Catholic Church often becomes a powerful voice of dissent, which is difficult, if not impossible, to muzzle. Lucia Newman, CNN, Havana.
Clearly, many people here do hope that the Pope's visit will spur more freedom. A prominent human rights activist today said that he hopes the Pope's visit brings a scarce commodity, the commodity of hope, and they hope that he will inspire a more open, a more democratic future for Cuba. Judy?
Christian, have you had a chance to talk to ordinary Cubans to find out if they're talking about the Pope's visit? Is it something that people are aware of? All right, Christiane is not able to hear. We thank her very much for that report. Now to Washington and Bernie.
It was a day for apologies at a small Maryland college.
Bernie, still here in Plaza of the Revolution, where there's a great hubbub in the last few minutes. Trucks have come here. They're still laying asphalt here in the main square for the Pope's Mass on Sunday. Behind me, you see the dove-shaped altar. The dove of peace will be the symbolism there for that Mass. Now, also, as you mentioned, Cuban exiles from the United States and other religious pilgrims from the United States within the last hour or so have started arriving here in Havana. The first lot of them are coming by airplane from the United States for the ceremonies for the Pope's Masses. There has been a great deal of controversy, really, about the Pope's visit amongst the Cuban exiles, most of them based in Miami. And joining us now from Miami is Father Christopher Marino, spokesperson for the Miami Archdiocese. Father Marino, thank you for joining us. Now, your archdiocese had to cancel a very large seaborne pilgrimage here after pressure from the Cuban exiles there. How is the church handling that pressure and those divisions amongst the community there?
Well, there were many reasons why the ship was canceled. There were many reasons that helped the Archbishop to make that decision. But our intention always was to have a pilgrimage to go to Cuba, and that will still take place, however abbreviated. We'll be joining the Archbishop on Sunday as we fly down to Havana from Miami to participate in the Holy Father's Mass. And there should be about 180 people on the plane, Cuban exiles, clergy, many people from Miami who want to be part of that celebration to show our Cuban brothers and sisters that we're there. Not only do we think of them, but we are physically going to be present with them to join them as we worship Jesus Christ.
But certainly, Father, your pilgrimage, the ones that you're organizing, are going to be much smaller, and they were going to be much shorter time on the ground here. Also, we understand one of the bishops from the Archdiocese has decided he doesn't want to come here. How is the Catholic Church in Miami dealing with the divisions within its own ranks on this trip?
Well, there's not division in our own ranks in regard to that. You cite Bishop Agustin Roman. Bishop Roman is our senior Cuban auxiliary. We have 2 Cuban auxiliary bishops. And he, from the very beginning, said that he would not himself go physically to Cuba because he himself was physically expelled from Cuba as a young priest. But from the very beginning, he has been very vocally supportive of the Holy Father's visit and also of the Archbishop's desire to bring a pilgrimage. And Bishop Roman, this very night in Miami, in his shrine of Our Lady of Charity, is beginning a vigil of masses and processions and adoration of the Blessed Sacrament in support of the visit of the Holy Father and the participation of the Archdiocese of Miami. So Bishop Roman is very much with the mind of the Holy Father and with the mind of the Archbishop in supporting the pilgrimage to Cuba. Now there is some...
And what does the Catholic... Father, what does the Catholic Church think? What do you think about Catholics, people in your own flock, who oppose the Pope's visit here?
Well, some of them have the fear that the visit of the Holy Father will somehow give legitimization to the Castro regime. But that doesn't seem to be something that'll happen, because if we look at the history of John Paul II's visits, he's visited some very disturbing and difficult places and met with some very difficult people. And the results, perhaps they weren't immediate, but the results came later, were always very positive. So I wouldn't think that this would be giving legitimization to the repressions of the Castro regime, but I think it's a window of hope. And the Pope is going as a messenger of truth and a messenger of hope. And he's always brought that. And the Holy Spirit has worked through him very beautifully in the past. We look at the former Soviet Union and some other places, Sandinista, Nicaragua, and other regimes. The Holy Father, by things that he said and telling the truth about man, telling the truth about human dignity, have opened up doors that the leaders in those countries have not very easily been able to close again. So the Spirit is very powerful, and John Paul II has truly been, for these 20 years he's been Pope, an instrument of the Holy Spirit. And it's interesting to note that the Holy Father's been Pope for 20 years. He's been invited to Cuba before, but it's only now at this moment that he's accepted the invitation. He's not naive. He's not going to be manipulated. He knows what he's doing. And please God, the Holy Spirit will work through him once again to bring transformation of hearts. And then once a person's heart is transformed, society and systems are transformed. So that's what we hope for in these next few days as the Holy Father, John Paul II, goes to Cuba for the first time.
Father Marina, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
God bless
you. Certainly the Catholic Church here hopes that the Pope's visit will give, as they say, some space for religion, specifically for Catholicism, after his trip. They want the Catholic Church here to be allowed more freedoms in the days and the months and the years clearly after his trip. Now, a lot of people, a lot of governments, particularly the United States government, for many, many years now, has tried to put a great deal of pressure on the Cubans. The Cuban people, we've learned since we've been here, are very proud, somewhat prickly, and they don't give in very easily to outside pressure, despite the considerable daily hardships that they endure. You can learn a lot about a place just by riding a bus with 350 people on board. That's a lot of people. Mercedes has been taking tickets for the past 15 years. This is as good a place as any to meet Cubans' legendary stoicism. Don't you find your buses a bit crowded? A little bit, says this woman. The bus is pretty crowded, isn't it? It's pulled along by a tractor-trailer, and it's called a camel for its two humps. Trying to strike up a conversation is a noisy affair, where even the simplest question yields a predictable answer. I would like to see some things in Cuba change, says Minerva, a lawyer, but the fundamental problem we have is the U.S. embargo. It's not the state that wants all these people crowded in a bus like this. But taxis are a luxury and a last resort. Gasoline is rationed, no problem. Cubans these days can get by on a prayer and a smile. Many Cubans here are awaiting the Pope's trip with a mixture of piety amongst the Catholics, amongst the believers, and curiosity amongst people who even to this day don't know who the Pope is. Some of the Catholic priests here have said they've had to introduce the Pope, tell their own flocks who he is, where he's coming from, and why he's coming. I'm Christiana Monpour reporting live from Havana. Judy and Bernie will be back with more of World View after this break.
The golden age of small business has arrived. Opportunity is everywhere, and now American Express gives you the power to seize it with the Gold Corporate Optima card. It's new, a corporate card that lets you pay over time, and it's yours free. Use it to extend payment with a low introductory APR of only 8.9%.
It's easy to apply.
With the Gold Corporate Optima card, increase your cash flow flexibility and pay at your own pace. Tap into a generous credit line of up to $20,000 to help your business grow. And get detailed monthly reports to help track and control spending, all with no annual fee.
Call now and we'll take your application right over the phone.
It's your business, so put the gold standard of financial services to work for you. American Express. Call 1-800-866-GOLD today and apply for the Gold Corporate Optima card. It's a golden opportunity because now American Express gives your business the power to do more.
In today's busy world, sometimes all you need is a little change of scenery. A place with the welcome warmth of a sunny summer day, the soothing rhythm of waves on the sand, and the excitement of the world's most famous tropical resort. So leave the winter world behind for the warmth and fun of Acapulco. Acapulco. Our scenery will do you a world of good.
It has grossed $230 million. It cost $200 million to make.
Ever a Catholic pope foot communist Cuba. Pope John Paul II's 5-day trip began about 8 hours ago in Rome when the 81-year-old pontiff boarded an Alitalia jumbo jet for the 12-hour flight. Meanwhile, across Cuba, the government has been racing to finish preparations in time for John Paul's arrival. He'll be greeted by Cuban President Fidel Castro. The government has been publicly urging Cubans to turn out. Meanwhile, Cuban exiles have been flocking to their homeland for this historic event, but bringing Christianity to the masses could prove a tough sell for the Pope in a country which has traditionally discarded religion and worship. Just 40% of Cubans consider themselves Catholic. Havana Bureau Chief Lucia Newman reports.
It's their wedding day, and Kenya and Fermin insist they're madly in love. But even on such a special day as this, they admit their marriage could well be temporary.
Now we're a couple. When that disintegrates, when there's no more love and happiness, it's impossible to remain married. You have to get divorced.
44-year-old Esteban Herrera, who sells pizzas, knows a lot about that.
I've been divorced 7 times. In fact, the last time was yesterday.
Herrera is hardly exceptional. Not in a country with one of, if not the highest divorce rates in the world. Cuba also has one of the highest rates of abortion in Latin America.
The main cause of mortality before the revolution was illegal. That's why it was decided to institutionalize it and insist that abortions be carried out by qualified doctors.
Although the state discourages abortion, it's free and readily available.
I have 2 children and have had 3 abortions.
I had to have an abortion because we had no place to live. My parents' house is already too crowded, and the same at my in-laws.
Indeed, an acute housing shortage, which forces couples to live cramped in with relatives and with little intimacy, is greatly responsible for both the high divorce and abortion rates. Unlike in the rest of Latin America, here the Catholic Church has little influence. Pope John Paul is preaching the Church's opposition to abortion, contraception, and divorce. But he's preaching to a nation of people who believe that abortion, contraception, and divorce are their right. Lucia Newman, CNN, Havana.
And our network certainly has an extensive staff in Cuba, and stay with CNN for live coverage of the Pope when he arrives in Cuba later today. We'll begin this afternoon at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time for the Pontiff's arrival in Havana at José Martí Airport there. Then when the arrival ceremony concludes, stay with CNN for a special edition of Inside Politics right here. Thursday night, tomorrow night, CNN presents a special report. The historic visit of Pope John Paul II to Cuba. That comes your way at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. Right now, 12 minutes past the hour. Quick break. Back after.
And outraged for a very long time. Months of in preparation, Pope John Paul II will make his first visit to the island nation this afternoon. It is the first pilgrimage ever by a pope to Cuba. Judy Fortin joins us now from Havana with more. Good morning, Judy.
Hi, Lynn. The Pope's plane should be landing about 4.5 hours from now. He'll begin a hectic 5-day schedule that includes papal masses in 4 different cities and meetings, a lot of meetings with church and government officials, and most importantly, ordinary Cuban citizens.
Images of Pope John Paul II are on billboards and posters all over Cuba. It's one of the few ways the Archdiocese of Havana was able to promote the visit. It didn't have permission to advertise on radio or television. The Cuban government has assured the Vatican there will be no restrictions on the Pope's movement or his ability to give speeches. Cuban Catholics are expecting the pontiff to preach about the value of religious freedom, something they're just beginning to experience.
We've seen a true rebirth or a return to the roots and to encounter again a tradition of faith and approach to the church.
Members of the Communist Party scoff at suggestions the Pope will try to influence future politics in Cuba.
I don't think that that's in the Pope's minds or in the church minds at all.
Most observers believe President Fidel Castro has carefully calculated the risks, but will gain economically from the visit and will bask in the attention of 3,000 visiting journalists. The U.S. government could stand to lose the most. John Paul is expected to renew his condemnation of the 35-year-old American economic embargo against Cuba, a policy strongly supported by exiles now living in the United States. Some are returning to their homeland for the historic papal visit.
It was a beautiful sight to see my palm trees again. And everybody in the airplane, we were so happy. Everybody started just shouting when we saw land.
Fidel Castro will be the first person to greet the Pope when he arrives here in Havana. He'll also have a private meeting with John Paul tomorrow afternoon. Judy Fortin reporting live in Havana. Lynn, back to you.
Thank you very much, Judy. Opening statement.
The way he knows that he's now dealing with a man who has played on this chessboard of geopolitics for longer than anybody and who has won hands down whenever he applied himself. And the fact that Fidel would admit him and let him talk to the people and appear and be enriched by the experience means that Fidel has said to himself, this is the future. This man, what this man stands for, the goodness, the tolerance, the kindness, the compassion, the love, this is what matters in the future. I know a lot of people
When you say this...
Yes.
Well, when you say this is the future...
Yes.
Do you mean, because the Pope is clearly staying for only 5 days, do you mean that he expects the church to become more of an alternative force in Cuba?
Certainly. Not only will the 245 churches that Castro suppressed be reopened, but there will be new series of priests and nuns. There will be schools opened. There will be a renewal of spirit, Christian. The spirit will be renewed and is being renewed today by the very presence of this man who signifies only spirit, which matters.
Let me play the devil's advocate, Father.
Yes.
A lot of people have tried to say that. Many people would like, perhaps some people would like to see the Pope usher in some kind of political change. Clearly, the Cubans have said there is nothing political about this visit. It's just a pastoral visit. He's a great man. But Cuba is not Poland, is it, Father? It's not the same kind of deep-rooted Catholicism?
No, it's not. It has a very deep-rooted Catholicism, but what the Pope is counting on is the force of the human spirit liberated and enabled by divine grace. And he represents that. He is the source of that as the head of the church. And God only knows, Fidel Castro only guesses at the changes that's going to make in the souls and the minds and the imaginations of Cubans listening to him from now on. It's a fact of history. It's a
Father,
fact.
some people suggest,
Yes.
some people suggest that perhaps the Pope, perhaps this entire visit might be used by Fidel Castro as a sort of bridge between Cuba and the United States. That
I'm
perhaps
sure.
the Pope or his aides
I'm
could
sure.
be an interlocutor. Do you think that's realistic?
I am sure. And Christian, without our entering into facts which are not public, there has been a lot of coming and going between the State Department and the Secretary of State in Rome and Castro's foreign office. There's been a lot of going on. Conditions are laid down and information is given. This is not done without the knowledge and the approval of the United States, in the sense that not that the Vatican would obey the United States, but they would keep them alerted to every move they make. And we know that Castro will use it. He's a very crafty politician. But let him use it, because long after he is gone, the force of spirit will remain and will triumph over everything that he created, which is anti-human. And he did do a lot of things which are anti-human.
Well, certainly today, Fidel Castro has urged all the Cuban people to come out and greet the Pope. Certainly, he's asked everybody to show Cuba in its best light and to give honor to what he calls one of the great figures of our time. We just saw a short while ago the chief of protocol and the Cuban Cardinal Jaime Ortega go up the stairs, go through the door to welcome the Pope and to start to invite him to deplane. CNN's Lucia Newman is at the airport. Lucia, what's going to happen next?
Christian, at any moment now, we should be able to see the papal nuncio descend from the plane with Pope John Paul II, who will then, and here we see him right now, he will now begin to descend the plane so that he can greet Fidel Castro, who does not see him as the visit of the beginning of the end of his regime, but much to the contrary, believes that the pontiff is somehow an ally of his.
Let's just look. This is indeed a historic moment. Pope John Paul II bending down to kiss the children. He will soon kiss a basket of Cuban soil that is being raised to his lips. We saw almost an excited President Fidel Castro moments ago wave eagerly as he saw the Pope emerge from the door of the plane. People who know Fidel Castro say that his first meeting with Pope John Paul II at the Vatican in 1996 had a profound effect on him. Fidel Castro there meeting the hierarchy of the Catholic Church. It's an incredible moment. Father Martin, what do you make of this?
Moments where great spiritual effects are being worked, because it is the reappearance of the Catholic hierarchy in Cuba, which has been really tantamount to being underground for the last 40 years of Castro's regime. And simply by a simple act of coming in his white airplane, this man has reversed history and made possible a new chapter. It is a big, big, big moment, and both enemy and friend realize the significance of it. The point is this, Christian, remember that Fidel Castro's soul can also be cleansed by the blood of Christ. He can also be cleansed.
Fidel Castro was asked recently, does he believe in God? And he didn't answer, because he said, if I say yes, I will offend somebody. If I say no, I will offend somebody. You talked about a great moment, and the two just checked their watches there.
That's right.
They're going to... Lucia, they're going to go to the podium next, is that right?
That's right. Pope John Paul is walking very, very slowly but firmly towards the podium and two chairs where he will eventually be sitting. And certainly the greeting has been very warm between the Pope and President Fidel Castro, who, as you say, did not want to confess whether or not he believed in God, but did say that Pope John Paul had prayed for him and that he was very, very grateful to him for having done so. He, in fact, has been speaking a lot in rather religious terms, talking about miracles and things like that. In fact, President Castro says that the fact that the Pope is here at all is a miracle. He seems to see it that way. Certainly so do many, many people here in Cuba. And the message from the Pope, one of the ones that perhaps will ring out the strongest, is that of reconciliation, of love between brothers. This is a country where, as you know, millions of Cubans live not in this country, but across the Straits of Florida and in other countries around the world. It has been a very divided country, divided politically and also religiously. And the Pope's visit here may certainly bring perhaps an end to that era, Christian.
Well, we've just seen the Pope be introduced to members of the Communist Party hierarchy, the Politburo. That in itself, again, is an incredible moment. Of course, the Communist Party members...
Sorry, Christian, I was
Communist Party members... It's dueling microphones here. Communist Party members, only until recently, were forbidden from being believers. Only recently has Fidel Castro relaxed that prohibition on the Catholic Church.
Christian, I was going to say, I'm sorry for the interruption, that the Secretary General of Havana's Communist Party was one of the first people to shake the Pope's hand. And these are new and very, very different times here in Cuba. Everyone is clapping. There are some people whose tears are falling down their cheeks. There is a lot of emotion here. And if you can hear, we can hear it, we can feel it. The Pope is present, is what the people here are sharing. I don't know if you can hear that, but the chant goes on and on. It can be heard, it can be felt that the Pope is present.
Para recibir por el centro. Presente. Santidad Juan Pablo II, soberano del Estado de la Ciudad del Vaticano. La Guardia de Honor está formada. Jefe de la Guardia, Coronel Guerrero Ramos.
Testing. Tell us if it is okay.
Santidad. La tierra que usted acaba de besar se honra con su presencia.
Is honored by your presence.
No encontrará aquí
you will not find here the peaceful and generous native people who inhabited this island when the first Europeans arrived. Most of the men were annihilated by the exploitation and the enslaved work. They could not resist. The women turned into pleasure objects or domestic slaves. There were also those who died by the homicidal swords or victims of unknown diseases brought by the conquerors. Some priests have left tearing testimonies of their protests against such crimes. In the course of centuries, over 1 million Africans ruthlessly uprooted from their distant lands took the place of the enslaved natives already exterminated. They made a remarkable contribution to the ethnic composition and the origins of our country's present population, where the cultures
the beliefs and the blood of all participants in this dramatic history have been mixed.
La conquista y colonización de todo el hemisferio se estima
It has been estimated that the conquest and colonization of these hemispheres resulted in the death of 70 million natives and the enslavement of 12 million Africans. Much blood was shed and many injustices perpetrated, a large part of which
después de siglos
still
de sacrificios y de luchas,
remain after centuries of struggle and sacrifices under new forms of domination and exploitation.
Condiciones extremadamente difíciles,
Under extremely difficult conditions, Cuba was able to constitute a nation.
con insuperable heroísmo
It
por
had
su
to fight
independencia.
alone for its
Sufrió
independence.
por ello hace
With unsurmountable
exactamente
heroism.
100 años
And exactly 100 years ago, it suffered a real Holocaust
donde
in the
murió una
concentration
parte
camps,
considerable de su
where a large
población,
part of its population perished,
fundamentalmente mujeres,
mostly
ancianos
women,
y niños.
all men and
Crimen
children.
de los colonialistas que no
A
por
crime of
olvidado en la
the
conciencia
conquerors
de la
that was
humanidad
not forgotten
dejó de
by
ser monstruoso.
humanity's conscience.
Usted, hijo de Polonia
You,
y testigo de
son of
Ospiesin,
Poland,
lo
and
puede
a witness of
comprender
Ospiesim,
mejor que
can
nadie.
understand this better than anyone.
Hoy, santidad,
Today, Holy Father,
de nuevo se intenta el genocidio,
genocide is attempted again,
pretendiendo rendir por hambre, enfermedad y
by
asfixia
hunger,
económica total
illness
a un
and total
pueblo que
economic
se niega a someterse a
suffocation.
los
Some try to
dictados y
subdue
al
these
imperio de la
people
más poderosa potencia
that
económica,
refuses to accept the
política
dictates
y
and the
militar de la
rule of the
historia.
mightiest economic, political,
Mucho más
and military
poderosa
power in history.
que la antigua
Much
Roma,
more powerful than
que
the old
durante
Rome
siglos
that for
hizo
centuries
devorar por las fieras
had the beasts
a los que se
devour
negaban
those who
a
refused
renegar de su
to
fe,
abdicate their faith.
como aquellos cristianos
Like those Christians
atrozmente calumniados
horribly slandered
para justificar los
to
crímenes.
testify the crimes.
Nosotros, tan calumniados como ellos,
Who are as slandered
preferiremos
as they
1000
were,
veces la muerte
we choose
antes que
1,000 times
renunciar
death
a nuestras
rather than
convicciones.
abdicate our convictions.
Igual que la Iglesia, la revolución
The revolution,
tiene
like
también
the church,
muchos
also
mártires.
has many martyrs.
Santidad.
Holy Father,
Pensamos igual que usted
we feel
en
the
muchas
same way
importantes
you do
cuestiones
about
del mundo de
many
hoy.
important
Y
issues
ello
of today's
nos
world.
satisface grandemente.
And we are very pleased it
En
is so.
otras, nuestras opiniones difieren,
In other matters, our
pero
views are
rendimos
different,
culto
but we
respetuoso
are most
a la
respectful
convicción
of
profunda
your strong
con que
convictions
usted defiende sus
about the
ideas.
ideas you defend.
En su largo peregrinaje
In your long
por el
pilgrimage
mundo,
around the world,
peregrinaje por el mundo, usted ha podido ver con sus
you have been
propios
able to
ojos
see with your own eyes
mucha injusticia,
many injustices,
desigualdad,
inequalities,
pobreza,
poverty,
campos sin cultivar y
uncultivated lands,
campesinos sin alimentos y sin tierra,
and landless, hungry farmers,
desempleo,
unemployment,
hambre,
hunger,
enfermedades,
illnesses,
vidas que podrían salvarse
lives that could
y
be
se
saved
pierden por unos centavos,
with little money being lost for lack of it,
prostitución
illiteracy,
infantil,
child prostitution,
niños trabajando desde los 6 años
6-year-old children
pidiendo
working
limosnas
or begging for
para poder
alms
vivir.
to survive.
barrios marginales
Shanty towns
donde viven cientos de millones
where
en
hundreds of
condiciones
millions
infrahumanas,
live in unworthy conditions,
discriminación por razones de raza o de
race
sexo,
and sex discrimination,
etnias enteras
complete
desalojadas de sus
ethnic groups
tierras
evicted
y
from the
abandonadas a
lands
su suerte,
and abandoned to their fate,
xenofobia,
xenophobia, contempt for other peoples, cultures which have been or are currently being destroyed, mysterious loans, unpayable and uncollectible debts, unfair exchange, outrageous and unproductive financial speculations, an environment being ruthlessly and perhaps helplessly destroyed, and unscrupulous weapons trade with disgusting lucrative intents, wars, violence, massacres, generalized corruption, narcotics, vices, and an alienating consumerism imposed on peoples as an ideal model. Mankind has seen its population increased almost fourfold just in this century.